I'll see you a little time.
Yeah.
Okay, Uhuru. I just really want to salute Carrie Porter, just an amazing organizer here in Huntsville, Alabama. And Porter. Porter? No. And just, it's really been great having you here, and Ryan and Michael and everybody that helped make this possible. I really salute all of you, and of course, Dr. Aisha Fields, who couldn't be here today. We salute her in this beautiful store, Zanzele Consignment, and Kobina, and Kundai, and just all of the Uhuru movement here, and all of you who have come out today to be part of this. As Carrie said, my name is Penny Hess. I'm the chair of the African People's Solidarity Committee. And this is the second, as has been said, of the 2018 Day of Reparations to African people. So we were just in St. Louis, where you saw the Black Power blueprint on this video, and where the African People's Socialist Party held their 7th Congress, which actually lasted a whole week. And it involved African people from around the U.S. and around the world coming together to plan the strategy for African liberation for the next 5 years and more. So it was really powerful, and it was powerful to be there. I want to salute Jesse Neville, who is the chair of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, who is also a leading member of the African People's Solidarity Committee, which I am part of, and Comrade Jesse ran for mayor in St. Petersburg, Florida last year. Just did an amazing job under the leadership of the Uhuru movement, fighting for unity through reparations. Kicked the ass of the ruling class. And so many people. It was really powerful, being part of that campaign, to, just going door to door and talking to so many people from the white community, just express how much they had deep unity with the slogan, unity through reparations, to the African community, and how that had changed their lives, and they could begin to see the world in a different way. So that was historic, and Jesse's a great leader of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. I want to start by just saluting Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who is our leadership, who is my leadership, who is the founder and leader of the African People's Socialist Party and the African People's Solidarity Committee that we are under the leadership of, and we work in the white communities. That we have to look at the hard truth, and we have to be able to recognize it and take responsibility for it. So I just want to say, first of all, that the African People's Socialist Party, led by the Chairman Omali Yeshitela, and is an organization that is worldwide. So if you aren't aware that it was formed in 1972, the African People's Socialist Party was formed in 1972, almost getting close to 50 years, and it is about organizing the liberation of Africa and African people all around the world. Africa belongs to African people. That's just a given. And all the resources of Africa, which are still being looted and stolen every single day. And that all of the stolen labor of African people, all the genius, to survive, to create the greatest wealth stolen from them, the greatest amassing of wealth that has ever existed on this planet Earth came from the stolen labor of African people. And that all of this belongs to Africans. How can we live in a world and just take for granted that Africans on the continent live on $1.50 a day if they have a job, and that in this country young African people are gunned down by the police every single day and make up the largest prison population that exists any place on this planet, that the United States has more people in prison than China does, and China has, what, 1.5 billion people? And that there are 2.5 million people in prison, and that half of them, at least, are African. Another third of them are indigenous and Mexican. So, these are concentration camps that exist to continue to fuel the economy for white people. But the African People's Socialist Party is something. Chairman Omali Yeshitela was active in the 1960s. He tore down a racist mural that hung in St. Petersburg, Florida, and it was very powerful. That was in 1968. And he ripped down, it hung in the courthouse, in City Hall in St. Petersburg, right in the mezzanine, and it was one of those projects that was by some great artist dating back to the 1930s, and it showed a hideous portrayal of African people on the beach entertaining the white tourists. And it was right there in City Hall, visible to anybody that would come in. So Chairman Omali Yeshitela ripped that down once when he was a member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and they were having a press conference on the steps of City Hall, and they just went in with the seizure of the moment and ripped that thing down. But the chairman was sentenced to 2 federal offenses and faced 5 years in prison for that. He served about 2 or 2.5 years in prison for that, for doing that. And, the city should apologize to him. All over the country, cities are taking down their Confederate monuments and everything. Well, the chairman did that for St. Petersburg way before, it was fashionable. They should be making an apology to him, but they never have done that. But they've also never been able to hang another mural painting on that wall where that is. This was a huge thing. And so, it shows the strength of the movement for African liberation. But the chairman was part of the movement of the 1960s, the Black Power movement of the 60s. And that movement was hit really, really hard by what's called a counterinsurgency, a U.S. government war that, in fact, assassinated the leaders, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Fred Hampton, and so many others, or imprisoned so many African leaders of that period, that some of whom are still in prison today, like Sundiata Acoli. Assata Shakur was able to escape from prison and lives apparently in Cuba now, but there's still like a $2 million bounty out on her head. This is the legacy. They destroyed the organizations, and they followed that counterinsurgency war, which is a war against the just struggle of people to fight for their liberation and freedom, the kind of thing the U.S. was doing in Vietnam to the people of Vietnam and to other places around the country. They were doing inside the borders of the United States. And, we just think, oh, well, what happened after the 60s? Was everybody was satisfied with what they got? Well, no way. No way, and the U.S. government came in after assassinations, after jailings and imprisonment, and salted the earth, as Chairman Omali Yeshitela tells us, through the imposition massively of crack cocaine and other kinds of drugs into the African community. It started out with heroin from Southeast Asia, where the U.S. was fighting, and later, as it was fighting against the liberation struggles in Nicaragua and places like that, where cocaine is, then they brought in cocaine and crack cocaine, actually a derivative of cocaine, and flooded the African community with that. So, this is really important to understand. It's not like the struggle of African people went out of style. It was crushed. It was crushed by the imposition of drugs to salt the earth and the massive criminalization of African people and building of prisons, all over this country, that white people were and probably still are in many towns, putting up billboards, bring prison to our town, because this is a chance for white people to get jobs where they didn't have to go to college and they didn't have to have a degree, but they could then make $90,000 a year or whatever or more through these prisons. So it was part of the economic development for rural, especially for rural white areas all over the United States. This is what happened. This is the reality in this country, and Chairman Omali Yeshitela was able to sum that up. And his goal was to build a party of African workers, of the African working class, to be able to unite African people from all around the world as one people, not as African Americans, not as Afro-Brazilians, but that African people, as he says, are one people everywhere, and in no place do they have rights. Every place that African people are, they're catching hell. And the chairman also, it was very clear that every place there are white people, they're doing well. So why is that? What is the science behind that? What happened? But the reality is that the chairman and the African People's Socialist Party has been building this organization and the Uhuru movement all over the United States, all over Europe, London and Paris, Germany, Sweden, places like that, as well as on the continent of Africa, especially right now in Kenya and in Tanzania or South Africa, especially around the town of Johannesburg. So, you know, that this is part of keeping the African Revolution alive and fighting for ultimately the total liberation and unification of Africa and African people within the lifetime of Chairman Omali Yeshitela. They are determined to do that. They will be free. So part of the strategy of the African People's Socialist Party was to build a front in the white community. It wasn't their responsibility to go in the white community, it's ours. And that their idea was, if they can have white people inside of white power raising the same things that the African community is raising, that white people owe reparations to African people, that this country and capitalism itself is built on slavery, it's built on the assault on Africa, it's built on genocide, it's built on plunder and suffering and war and theft, and that reparations must be paid because all white people sit on this pedestal of the oppression of African people. That it's our responsibility to go into the white community and therefore be a front for the struggle for black power, but coming out of a white face. And that's what this is about. And we've been building for reparations from the white community for many, many, many years, 42 years. We've been out there, we've been struggling, we've been organizing, and the Uhuru movement as well. And you saw the Black Power Blueprint, which is the front in St. Louis, but the African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru movement also has a movement and a furniture store that's part of their self-reliance institutions in Philadelphia that's been there for more than 25 years. They have Uhuru Foods and Pies in Oakland, California that's been there for about 35 years. They have a furniture store, Uhuru Furniture, on Grand Avenue in Oakland, California that's been there for over 25 years. They have Zenzele here. They have a base in New York, in Philadelphia, and many other places around this country, and it's increasingly growing. So what you saw about the Black Power Blueprint is just the latest in in their latest front that they're building. So it's very, very powerful to be part of this. I also want to salute Deputy Chair Onizine Yeshitela, who is sort of the coordinator, exactly was the coordinator of the Black Power Blueprint, who went into St. Louis from where she lived to start acquiring, properties there and to be able to use them not for, to fight, not just to fight gentrification, but that's part of it, but to bring economic and political power into the hands of the African community. So what they are doing is they transformed a building that is now the Uhuru House, Aquaba Hall, that you saw them, the incredible transformation of that on the video. Also, across the street were two condemned buildings. Those have been taken down, and they built an incredible, or implanted, I would say, an incredible 50-foot flagpole, and they have a 25-foot red, black, and green flag. The African community, this is in the middle of the most impoverished African community of St. Louis on the north side, which goes for miles and miles and miles of just, it looks a lot like Syria, bombed out. That this is, just built a tremendous kind of support in that city, and it's very powerful to see. So when Chairman Omali Yeshitela formed the African People's Solidarity Committee 42 years ago, right around now, this month, 42 years ago, I happened to be there. It was in St. Petersburg, Florida. I was living in Louisville, Kentucky, which is only about 4 hours from here at the time. And I saw the chairman speak in Louisville, and he said at that time that they were forming the Solidarity Committee. So I went with some other people. I went to that founding conference. And when I started to, really understand what the chairman was talking about and what this was about and what the conditions are for African people in this country and the world, and what white people have done and what we are part of, it just was something that I couldn't walk away from, because it can't be healed. It has to be overturned. It has to go. It's a whole system that has to go. And it's not something that we can just say, I don't think it's because it's a passion. We have to change the world, and we have to do it in a way that's nobody at the expense of anybody else. It's not going to be something for us at the expense of everybody else. One of the things that Chairman taught us is, and I think from that very first conference, was that the question that we would be struggling against is not racism, it is colonialism. And that makes so much sense to me and to us, because racism is a self-centered thing about the ideas in our heads. And we can spend a lot of money and take all these classes, and maybe we feel better, but we still go back to, our life on the pedestal of everybody else. And African people's children are still being gunned down on the streets. There's another Mike Brown, there's another, Sandra Bland, there's another person killed because colonialism is still there. But when it's described as colonialism, when we understand that, then it makes it clear that there is state power behind the oppression of African people. It doesn't revolve around, and frankly, the African People's Socialist Party doesn't give a damn about the ideas in our heads. They want to know what our stand is in the world, and a concrete stand of reparations to African people. And I just feel that the stand for reparations is something that is so powerful. It is a self-criticism. It's a genuine self-criticism to the African community. But it's also, in a way, it's something for us that redeems us, that lets us, for the first time, have an honest relationship with African people and the people on the planet Earth. Because when we understand this as colonialism, then we understand that all white people sit on this pedestal of the oppression of African people. All of us. Although we're not all the Rockefellers, we're not all, some of us are catching hell, and a lot of white people are in despair. But we have to understand that everything that we had, that Europe was poor, it was oppressed, and it was under feudalism. At the time when Europe left the shores of Portugal and Spain and went out to assault Africa, starting in 1415, starting before Columbus, 75 years before Columbus. Europe was already assaulting Africa, and it went into Africa, and by the end of the 15th century, Europe had already stolen 700 tons of gold from Africa, enriching what had been this poor, cold rock of a place where white people didn't have any rights. The majority of white people were serfs and peasants, had nothing. There was the lords and the ladies of the castle and, the rest of us, which was the vast majority. So this was the beginning of the wealth for Europe. This was the beginning of Europe as a wealthy power, as an imperialist power. This is how it started. And after they plundered all the gold of the west coast of Africa, Europe immediately began taking and seizing and kidnapping African human beings and turning African people into commodities. You know what a commodity is? An item for sale. Into an item for sale. And I think it was Frantz Fanon that called it thingification. Turning human beings into a thing, into a commodity, into a into a machine to work for free, to create all of this wealth, this stolen wealth that was here, that enabled white people to come from Europe for the first time as poor people, coming across as workers, as poor people, and begin to, this is recorded history. This is not, you can't really debate this. This is real. This is what happened. They try to cover it over. They try to tell us all kinds of fantasies about how we worked hard and we saved our money and we were thrifty and all of this kind of thing. And this is how we got to where we are today as white people. We know that's a lie. We came here, and if you read your history, it is deep. This state alone, 360 Africans were murdered by white people, by white citizens in this state. And, and no white person ever paid a price for that. So it was basically legal. Mm-hmm. It was legal. And enslavement of African people was legal. That was the law. And so, we participate, as we said, in the genocide. And by the way, here in Huntsville, I read that 26 African people were lynched, which is torture and terror right here in this town. In this town, right here. This is why we say that when we talk about the question of reparations and why we have to have a day of reparations, that is the single most important question in the world today. It really is. It's at the bottom of everything. I don't care if you want to talk about how Trump got in. Isn't that about the question of the oppression of African people? That's at the heart of that. And so was Obama, who's another ruling class, functionary for the ruling class of white power. So this is the question, whether we're going to talk about the oppression of women, even of white women, whether we're going to talk about the police murders of African people, the mass imprisonment, or U.S. war that is against the people of Syria, against what's happening to the people of Yemen right now that nobody wants to talk about. Mm-hmm. That this is the question of the assault on Africa, which it started with, the theft of African human beings, the kidnapping, the destruction of African civilization and societies, and power, the destruction of indigenous freedom and liberation, and the colonization of the majority of the planet. There is no place on this planet, not the Philippines, not India, not the Arab world, all of South America, where people did not face genocide, where they did not face terror at the hands of Europeans. And this is how Europe became wealthy and powerful, and this is what we have to come to terms with, because we played a role in it, because we benefit from it. We get the highest standard of living on the planet Earth. We are the colonizers. We're the colonizer nation. We're the oppressors of the world. That's why we're hated around the world. And that's why, when we see this crisis of imperialism that Chairman Omali Shatella has defined, this system is in a crisis. It's falling apart. Even the entire planet, they're saying, did you read the report that just came out from the United Nations that's saying, in the next 20 years, there might not even be a habitat on this planet for human beings to live in. That's how the same system that would destroy humanity all over the world doesn't give a damn about the planet itself. And to try to extract that reality from environmentalism is just one more way of seeing the world through white eyes, because it's totally tied to enslavement, to genocide, to colonialism and oppression. They wipe out hundreds of millions of indigenous people and killed 200 million, African people in the attempt to enslave them. They don't give a damn about this planet, about the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere or anything else. They don't give a damn about it. This is a system of capitalism, and it doesn't give a damn about you either. It doesn't give a damn about white people either. So, you know, we live in a period when they call it the deaths of despair, that white people are dying at such a rate that the life expectancy for white people is declining rapidly, because 88,000 people in this country, mostly white people, die of drug overdose every year, and alcoholism, another like 60,000, and suicide. And we see this in the paper, we see this in the news constantly. And as long as we sit there and say, that there's going to be something for us at the expense of everybody else, we're going to be depressed. What kind of system is this? This is a system that's about profit, that is about rape and sexual assault and just crushing the human spirit, killing the ability of human beings to live and to be able to produce and reproduce life in their own interest. And it tells us that we are something, that we see a narrative through our own point of view, sitting on the pedestal of everybody else. The chairman calls that the fact that we consider ourselves the subjects of history. Everybody else is the object. That long before white people killed other white people in Germany, as known as Jews, they were already had killed tens of millions of Africans on the continent of Africa, but nobody ever called that genocide.
Right.
It wasn't the word genocide till white people killed other white people in Europe. That was not even a word. And these are the questions. This is what we have to face. The only way to go forward is for the system to go. All the people that live as victims of imperialism around the world can't live. They want to live. They're determined to live and survive, and their children are going to survive. And that all the problems of imperialism, we're not going to solve it. We're not going to solve, even the whole question of the environment. We can't solve that. We are part of the system that created the problem. Mm-hmm. African people, when they're free, the genius of the African working class will solve that problem. Mm-hmm. Indigenous people, because when they had power over their lands and their people, there was not a problem. It wasn't in conflict with the environment or anything else. That's the world that we have to be free. It just makes sense. It makes sense. We have to have revolution.
Yes.
We have to have revolution. What I'm talking about is capitalism. It's your debit card. It's your credit card. It's your mortgage. This is what the system is. It can't be reformed. Thomas Jefferson owned 300 African people. So we're supposed to look to him? Mm-hmm. Carrie asked me to say, the chairman's been talking about this a lot. What is revolutionary morality? Well, revolutionary morality is what the African People's Socialist Party and the African Revolution represents. It represents the ability of all people on the planet to be free. It represents, as the party makes clear, the end of all oppression. Not against women, not against children, not against same-gender loving, not against trans. And by the way, did you see that Trump is just sending, the Trump administration is just saying that they're going to totally end the description of transgender now? I don't know if you saw that. That was in today's New York Times. They're going to end that, and that a person can only say what is on their birth certificate. They can only say that. That's going to go for law. I mean, that's in a system. White power does that.
Yep.
So, when we are struggling for solidarity and genuine solidarity with African people, the African Revolution, the African People's Socialist Party is against all oppression. All oppression. And that is going to be the flowering of humanity. That's going to be the only thing that's going to solve the problems left to us by a system that's built on rape and genocide and enslavement of human beings. So it's a world I want to see. I was there in St. Louis when they raised for the first time. I had the honor of being there. The flag a few weeks ago, the 25-foot square red, black, and green flag. And it was very emotional. I mean, people driving by from the African community were stopping and getting the children out of the car and saluting it. It was very, very beautiful. But I mean, that's the flag I want to be under.
Yeah.
Because the red, white, and blue is about slavery and genocide, and I want nothing to do with that. I want to see a world in which the red, black, and green flies for all people, for everyone, and that there's not going to be a system that lets us have something at the expense of somebody else. That's the only way that this entire planet can survive. So, you know, I just salute all of you for coming out again. I call for the stand of reparations to African people. It must go back to them. That's a liberation stand for us. It gives us the ability to be part of the future, to be part of humankind. We have self-imposed isolation from everybody else, as the chairman says. We don't need to have that, but we can't just say, oh, can't we all get along now? No, we have to do our part. We have to go in and unleash those stolen resources, and they have to go back to the African Revolution, because there's no revolution that doesn't have an economic base to it. And Africa has a right to have its resources back. So, you know, I just really want to thank you for coming out. I'm very excited about this event. We have several more events for the Days of Reparations coming up in the next couple of weeks, including St. Petersburg, Florida, Gainesville, Florida, Boston, Brooklyn, Washington, or Philadelphia, Seattle, and Portland. So we're going to be really traveling all over this year, and it's very, very exciting. So I just want to end by saying unity through
reparations.
Uhuru.